Hi everyone, my name is Taormina Lepore. I go by Tara. My pronouns are she and they, and I'm here to talk to you about coprolites. Coprolites come from two Greek words, kopros, which means poop, and lithos, which means stone. So a coprolite is literally a poop stone. For my master's work, when I was at the University of Colorado Boulder, I worked with paleontologist Karen Chin to take a look at some really fascinating coprolites, fossil droppings, from what we believe were Tyrannosaurus rex. And we have some really cool evidence to kind of guess that this was Tyrannosaurus rex droppings, including the fact that these droppings were chock full of chopped up bone. And we don't know what kind of animal the bone came from, but we do know that whatever was making these droppings was a pretty big animal that ate meat. And our best estimate for big animals that ate meat in the Laramie Formation in Colorado, which would have been the very end of the age of dinosaurs, the end of the Cretaceous period, is Tyrannosaurus rex. So you think you have a coprolite that is a fossilized poop stone. Well, how the heck do you know it's actually a fossilized dropping and not just some random rock? Well, one really interesting way that we can look at fossilized droppings is through chemical analysis. We can take a little tiny piece of a fossil dropping and we can go ahead and plug it into a big microscope called a scanning electron microscope. And once this little piece of coprolite is in that scanning electron microscope, we can go ahead and analyze through pointing and clicking on parts of that fossil dropping, and it'll give us some chemical analysis. We can also grind up pieces of fossilized dropping and picture a mortar and pestle, like you're going to be grinding up your favorite herbs and spices. But instead, you're grinding up a tiny piece of very dry, very old, very rock-like fossilized dropping until it's powder. And so those can also be used, mortars and pestles, to grind up pieces of fossil dropping and run chemical analysis. Now, what kind of chemical analysis are we looking for? Well, I looked at the droppings of meat-eating dinosaurs, and it turns out when you eat meat, and there's bone and pieces of bone inside your droppings, the bone is made up of, in part, phosphate. And so in the coprolites, we can test for the presence of phosphate, which wouldn't normally be found in too great a level in the surrounding sand and dirt. But in the coprolite, if we find that phosphate, that's a really good indicator that we actually have the chemical substance of a true coprolite, at least from meat-eating animals. We can also look at the shape of a coprolite. And you might think a coprolite, a fossil dropping, would look kind of like poop, but often they're very amorphous, or they don't have a really strong shape to them. It just depends on what animal we think they came from. In the case of the Tyrannosaur droppings I worked on, they were big chunks, pieces that looked almost like chunks of rock. But if you were to look at the droppings of, say, fossilized shark droppings, for example, they come out in a sort of spiral shape because of the shape of a shark's, well, for better or worse, poop tube. So when sharks in the fossil record have produced droppings, we tend to see them, much like some modern shark droppings today, we tend to see this spiral-shaped pattern, which is really cool and interesting and kind of beautiful. So, coprolites, a brand new vocabulary word for you, and some very cool, fascinating stories that fossil poop can tell us from all different times and points in geologic history. And if you're curious to know more about coprolites and how we can find them and identify them as actual real droppings, feel free to post questions in the YouTube comments, and I'd be happy to try and answer them for you. Thanks so much.